To discuss this and the rest of the day's big stories, let's bring in the Australian's chief political correspondent, Geoff Chambers. Geoff, this was a shock announcement this afternoon. It came out of nowhere. McGowan said he'd only told his family and staff members. It wasn't until this morning that he told the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, as well as his cabinet colleagues. What are the federal implications here? Do you think this is going to make it more difficult for Albanese to hold some of those Labor seats in WA that he'd never won before?
Hi, Sharri. Short answer is yes, it absolutely does have a big impact. Mark McGowan was front and centre during last year's federal election campaign. He took the centre stage at the ALP campaign launch in Perth and introduced Anthony Albanese as the next Prime Minister of Australia. They overperformed in Western Australia. And if you remember on election night, Anthony Albanese actually had to wait for that red wave to come through over there in Perth before he could claim majority government. So in addition to losing a seat to the Teals in Curtin, for the first time in a very long time, Labor holds a commanding lead of 9-5 in terms of federal seats in Perth. And there's very few in Labor ranks who believe that they can retain those. And losing that popularity of Mark McGowan, WA voters traditionally have differentiated between state and federal politics. It had become a stronghold for the coalition, but they were fiercely loyal to McGowan off the back of his thumping 2021 election win. And a lot of that success there for Anthony Albanese was down to Mark McGowan.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Graham Richardson made the point on Sky this afternoon that usually voters do clearly separate state and federal issues. But in the case of WA, because McGowan was helping campaign for Albanese and because his popularity was so high, there was that factor. And now we're going to come back to this topic throughout the show. As I said, we've got Caroline De Russo, WA Liberal President, on in a moment to talk about McGowan. But Geoff, I want to turn to some of the other big stories today. PwC Australia announced further measures, it says, to improve its governance and accountability, its culture. It says it's trying to rebuild trust now with stakeholders. It's placing 9 partners on leave while this investigation continues. It's also under pressure. The Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, on radio this morning said he agreed that PwC should name all of those implicated. Have a listen.
I think all of this should become public at the appropriate time. Of course, there are investigations underway, and I don't want to say anything to interfere with those processes. But quite clearly, what went on there is completely unacceptable.
Where does this go from here, Geoff?
I think this has a long way to run. It's very rare that you get cross-party alliance going after one of the big corporate, one of the biggest corporate companies in this country. It's been a disastrous management of a crisis, one of the worst that I've ever seen. They're basically retrofitting responses on the run. You've got to remember when Peter John Collins, the central player in this, was banned as a tax practitioner in January. Those in the highest echelons of PwC knew this was coming for years, and at the very least in January should have taken stronger action. I guess they just wished that this would go away. It hasn't gotten away, and now it's completely out of control. So the AFP are involved. I suspect that those names will come out, and it's a real tragedy for the 10,000 people who work at PwC because we're talking about a minority here. Very senior people who didn't take action, and now the impact is being felt across the board.
Yeah, OK, and we'll keep on that story. Now, Peter Dutton has marked 1 year in the role of opposition leader. Look, he faces low polling for himself personally. The Liberals are also really struggling. He did a 1-year interview with The Australian with Dennis Shanahan. He said that he is working to try and shake off this hard image of him, which is, as he says, what the government is trying to paint him as. Look, what does he need to do to get the coalition in any sort of fighting position?
Well, in question time last week, you would have seen that they squarely focused on inflation, energy bills and the economy. And I think through this winter period, as people start receiving those very high record energy bills, when we see the RBA meet in coming months and any further moves on rates, I think in the first instance, they're going to sit back and prosecute their case and see how the government manages things. I know that Peter Dutton was looking at announcing policy in his budget reply speech a few weeks ago. He refrained from doing that, and they will have a bold policy agenda heading towards the election. And at the end of the day, and we've spoken about this before, Sharri, there really is no alternative to Peter Dutton. So I think it's all in with Dutton, there's a lot to manage in terms of getting those state divisions in shape and getting the membership engaged, because a lot of that has splintered at recent elections.
Yeah, look, a long road to go.